is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Burnout Brighter podcast. This is episode 96. My name's Matt. I'll be your host for this evening's events. As always, I'm joined by my wonderfully lovely co-host, Darren.
Oh, wonderfully lovely?
Yeah, Destiny's not here this week, so I decided to kind of throw them together for you.
I get 2 qualifiers. I feel so special.
You are such a special boy. And we have two guests. I think this is one of the first times we've actually had multiple guests on at once. Or at least it's been quite a long time.
Oh, it was back like one of our 10th episode or something where we had
something like that.
Madison and Devin on at the same time, or Madison. Anyways, 2
something.
People.
But these 2 people, one of which you guys are already familiar with. He was one of our first guests on the podcast, and he's now come back around, even though I don't know why. I mean, he ran away for about 80 episodes and decided to come back. Alistair, thank you so much for joining us again.
Hello, good to be back. The unexpected return. Good surprise, recurring characters.
Yeah, well, I'm so stoked when you come back on for episode 197. And for the first time, we have another good friend of ours who is a dungeon master extraordinaire and a fantastic creator of stories and different things. We have Mr. Wes joining us. Wes, how's it going?
Very good. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate the invite, guys.
I'm so stoked we have both of you on today because today's episode is going to be all about Dungeons and Dragons. We're going to be talking about what goes into making a cool campaign, why that game is so special and so exciting and so different than anything else that we've been playing, and a whole bunch of else. We're also going to wrap with a bunch of news about PlayStation, about Legend of Zelda, good and the bad for both. We'll see where this takes us. But we are going to start this episode, as we always do, with a round of random questions. Darren, we have 2 guests with us today, and there are 2 of us. So I'm gonna ask you to take the first random question and pick one of them, and then I'll do the second.
Okay. Oh man,
right?
Throwing me hard under the bus.
Yeah, usually I like to throw the guests under the bus, but today I throw the co-host right under the bus.
Genuinely not expecting that. Okay. I'm looking around my room for inspiration immediately, and I've found something. And I'm actually going to ask this question to Wes.
All right.
Spicy.
Launcher.
So Wes, if you were stranded on a space station, so like you're cut off from the world, you can't have like satellite internet or something like that. Like, I'm sorry, not
but
space
I'm in
station.
space. I got sweet service.
Yeah. All right. I'm changing immediately. You're on Mars. Like, you're further away. So like your only communication is like with your home base on Earth. What would you bring with you? 2 items that will help you survive on Mars, not physically survive, like mentally survive.
Ooh, 2 items for my mental well-being. Let's see. So if I did have a phone per se, would I have access to everything on it, or no? I can't use the internet to like look at podcasts and ebooks.
You'd have access
and
to stuff that does not involve the internet. So you'd have to like have it all downloaded coming with you.
So that's what I'm gonna go with.
Okay.
One item, the huge like extra whatever amount of terabyte data stick in my phone to get like all the books, all these like probably just a lot of books, shitload of books, man. I'm telling you,
sense.
Into that. And the second item.
Now you don't even need the second item. You've already got like
I only got books though. I only got books. I'd
true.
probably take like a you know what? Could I have a computer? Is that too much? The computer and the monitor, and I just got everything now. It's perfect.
you can bring your desktop. You can't bring the monitor, so you have to figure it out. Do you want the monitor or the phone? You can't do both. That's
monitor,
3 items now.
2, you know what? To entertain me for endless hours, 2 Lego pieces, and we're done. That's all I'm gonna need.
Did you guys see that app that like scans all your Lego pieces and tells you what you can build with them?
I think it is a creativity murder. No, I think it's a really cool idea.
Are you
I really
kidding me?
think it's cool. Inspiration at least. I like it.
If you could tell me what to make like that, I'd be like, yes, give me that. I have no creativity. I'm going to build the same thing 400 times.
I think the coolest thing is there's like an online build it yourself kind of program. You can design anything with all the bricks and order them. I think that's pretty fun. I've done it a few times. But yeah, my final answer is a computer and a monitor. I got all my books. I got all my everything. It's perfect. Old school, Command and Conquer Red Alert 1. I'm ready to go.
Minesweeper.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Minesweeper for days. I've never beaten it.
I want to thank you, Wes, for your answer because clearly I didn't plan it out well enough to survive it. And to the point where I'm going to gloss over the fact that you did not bring a mouse or a keyboard. So anyways, moving on to Alistair.
Touchscreen. He said touchscreen, right?
I'll rig it up.
He's gonna be like,
I'm on Mars. We got technology. You know what I'm saying? We figured it out.
It'll be like those Twitch streamers that play Dark Souls using like a potato. We're gonna have Wes doing that kind of stuff. Don't worry.
Didn't Matt Damon? Matt Damon like figured it out. He like grew crops with his own poop and stuff. Yeah, like I feel like I can make a mouse. Let's get up. Let's get at it.
All right, Al. Yes. I want to ask you a question. And if I wanted to ask you, okay, so I actually got one this time a little bit. I was just on another episode of a friend of ours shows called the Streamcast, and we talked all about anime RPGs, right? And how there is a tragic lack of good anime RPGs because all of them are arena battlers. So what I wanted to know, if you could pick any anime to make into an RPG, and then tell me what studio or what's the vibe of the game, because I went on a long Gintama rant. And if you want to hear about that, go check out the latest episode of the Streamcast, which will be live soon. Nice. But which anime would you want to see in video game form? And tell me a little bit about what that game would look like.
Well, I think I have like two answers for this. Easy. I'm gonna pick one though. I'll go for the more unusual one.
Give me a single sentence for one, and then a paragraph for the other.
I'll just do the one. I would say Trigun, because I've just been rewatching some of Trigun, and I would love to have like a kind of open world Western Wanderer where you get some of those Mandalorian vibes as you play Vash wandering from town to town. And then the difficulty, of course, with Vash being the pacifist that he is in this Western anime. So it's a space Western, more focused on the Western than the space. So you've got kind of your cowboy and sandy planet vibe. But he's a pacifist supreme gunman that doesn't kill anyone. So you'd make a shooter, maybe a third-person shooter, because you want to get some of that action dodge rolling and timing windows going in there. But you'd have a shooter where you're trying to pinpoint targets so that you don't actually kill anyone. And I think that would be really neat. So some kind of like non-lethal shooter. I'm always a big fan of like Deus Ex and Dishonor, where you have those non-lethal options. But some kind of like, exploring Western Wanderer vibes and this pinpoint accuracy shooting with Vash the Stampede.
That's so
on
cool.
Planet Gunspell.
It's actually really, really compelling.
So like what I want to know then is, if you accidentally kill someone, is it game over, reset the checkpoint? Like, let's say you accidentally pull a headshot when you don't want to. Does it punish you for that?
I think you'd have to do some kind of like desync thing, or
like Assassin's
maybe
Creed style?
they always have this little like cat that pops in as kind of like a little Easter egg every episode. Mm-hmm. So maybe if you like accidentally kill shot someone, the cat just pops in front of them and takes like a sponge bullet or something, or Vash like gives you the finger wave and it's like, hey, stop that, I'm better than this. I don't know. That'd be a tough one though.
That's so good. I actually think that would be a really cool way to try and implement it. That reminds me of that One Punch Man game where it was a fighter, but you can't play as Saitama. You just play as people fighting until Saitama can get there. So like, I like that idea of like a spin on a shooter, especially because it seems to fit the narrative. I like it, Al. Good job.
Thank you.
So now I'm going to throw to you guys, and I'll let Al and Wes try and figure out who's going to ask who will ask who a question first. And I'll give you each one to ask one of us, and you guys figure it out from here. Who do you want to ask what?
Should we bounce it back?
I want to bounce back to the question asker. You know what I'm saying? I think that's
fair.
The best way to go about it.
Yeah,
I'm good with that.
Sounds good.
So I guess that means I'm first and asking Darren this question. So we're gonna keep it in a D&D theme, and we're gonna word it like this. So you are embarking on an epic journey, and we're gonna not make it so complicated with like the class system. Let's keep it simple. You got like a damage dealer, you got a healer, and you have someone who can soak up damage, kind of like a tank.
Okay.
Which one would you be? And out of whatever real life media, pick whatever you want. Who are the other two people?
Can I augment this a little bit? Darren, could you do this with me, you, and Destiny? Who fills what slot?
Okay, there you go.
Oh my
Nice.
god.
Make it podcast related.
Very nice.
If Wes, if that's okay.
Oh,
I don't
of
want
course,
to step
of
on your
course.
question.
Okay. Well, I think that's pretty easy. I think there's a pretty clear answer. I think if we're going like healer, DPS, tank, I'm the healer. I'm the one that's in the back trying to like ease things over, trying to like patch people up, like, thanks for taking care of things, guys. I'm gonna just like make sure that you're all in working shape. And I'm gonna try and like, if things go bad, I'm gonna try and brush things under the rug. Maybe talk to the authorities and be like, guys, come on, like let's be nice.
Healing gun wounds with band-aids.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And Destiny's the tank. I think Destiny is the one that's soaking up the damage. She's the one that I think's the most hot-headed out of the three of us. And she's not here to defend herself, so maybe she'll disagree with me, and I'll have some choice words on the next podcast. But I really do think that she's the one, like, she's usually the one, like, in a conflict, I think gets in front of everything and is the one who's, like, defending the group. She's the one that's trying to, like, take the heat off of other people, or I'm trying to, like, calm everything down and heal people. And then, Matt, that leaves you for some sneaky damage. You're quick, you're agile, you're the DPS, you're the one who's got the plan on how to solve things, while Destiny's the distraction, and I'm the one trying to, like, work from behind the scenes. You're the one who's getting us out at the end of the day.
Ooh, Darren.
Well done.
Nicely done. And well worded.
Thank you.
I can't wait for Destiny to listen and see what happens. No, I think you're actually right, Darren. I would slot us the same way. Destiny's very much like, she's good at kind of protecting us, I think.
Yeah, and I'm trying to, like, diffuse stuff, and you're the one who's just like, well, I'm trying to basically heal up Destiny. You're just like behind the bar calling the cops or something like that to get the hooligans out of the tavern.
I like it a lot. Great question, Wes, and good answer, Darren. Al, it's your turn to now ask me something then.
Alrighty, keeping it kind of the same idea, since we're going to get into D&D. And because Wes and I are DMs, I'm going to try and throw your perspective around here. So typically when we ask video game questions, they're always like, what kind of hero do you identify with? Or what kind of world do you want to be in? But sometimes as a DM, you kind of feel yourself a little bit as an adversary as well as like a moderator. So if you are the adversary to the hero and you're defending your base against any and all video game heroes that are coming at you, who are you most terrified that you don't want to deal with? Who is that hero that gives you the Wiggins, that will put the fear into you, that you are not sure you can stop?
Oh, that's such a good question. I feel like with especially like a lot of games, you know, your first act is the one that the hero loses. So you know what I mean? Like I feel like if it's depending which act I catch all these heroes in, but and this is going to maybe feel like a cop-out answer. But I'm going to run with it anyway. I'd be terrified of any of the main characters from Persona. I'm not even going to pick one from Persona 5 or Persona 4 or Persona, any of them with that wild card ability, able to use any and all personas. They have the power of friendship. They have the ability to, you know, to call upon their waifus and the people in their significant circles. They, even when they like lose, they have like this entire like godlike following behind them that helps them, you know, overcome. They've literally taken down actual gods multiple times over. So like I feel like I'd have to really try and think of a way to stop them. Like maybe I just throw some, you know, waifu body pillows out at the front of the gates and see what would happen. But I would be scared to go up against a Persona protagonist.
I feel like any silent protagonist is actually terrifying from the adversary perspective,
It's
because like
always
they're
the
just going to
silent
come
kid.
and kick your ass, and they're not even going to tell you why or give you the time of day at all.
Something ain't right with that boy.
It's like I just imagine, like, you know, that the gif of Mario Kart with Luigi coming around and he has that stank face on. Like that's what I imagine any silent protagonist. That's what the face looks like, and I'd be terrified to deal with that. But great question, Al. I've never had to consider that. But of course, shocking no one, my answer still comes back around to Persona. So that's life sometimes. Why don't we keep it moving along into games that matter? So Wes, I'm going to come to you first. But for anybody who's not sure, whenever we have new guests on or guests who have not been here in a while, we like to talk about a game that matters to them because we like to try and link back to mental health when we can. A game that has gotten you through a tough moment, or a game that you think deserves to be recognized. So Wes, I'm going to go to you first, and then I'll go to Al, to give us a bit of a refresh after. Wes, what's a game that matters to you?
All right. So in university and even in the tail end of high school, I really enjoyed, storytelling with friends through D&D, and that is my biggest kind of thing to get me through tough times. Meeting up with people. Doesn't matter if you have nothing to talk about because nothing's really changing in your life. You get to kind of make your own story and come up with things that are going on and work as a team. But a game that helped me write, you get writer's block, man. For weeks, you're like, I have no good ideas. This is all crap. You'll write a 4-page thing in Word, you'll delete it, or you'll save it and never open it again because it wasn't quality. You know what I'm saying? So what really helped me out was gaining inspiration and blatant thievery of the writing from Obsidian Studios' Pillars of Eternity. Absolutely incredible game, and both of them, Deadfire as well, the second one that came out. I love the studio, and even going back, CRPGs like Baldur's Gate, it's all built around D&D anyways. These guys are turning what they probably played and they made it into a game, and I'm going backwards. I'm taking their game, stealing a couple little tidbits and ideas and making it into D&D. So I feel like just in general, they have really amazing character interactions. I remember this one time, this is actually Planescape Torment, but I'm going to put all of them in one pile. CRPGs, all of them into one pile. They have followers interacting with each other and NPCs interacting with each other. And I think going through that, like seeing that in a game is unique. I thought it was amazing. I don't see that very often. You get followers in Fallout. You can have one. You mod it to have two. They never talk to each other. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of, it's really jarringly odd. Mass Effect, great. You could have a couple people, they would talk. They nailed it. But in Baldur's Gate, in Pillars of Eternity, your characters will have arguments. They will even kill each other if you have the wrong two people together. And you need to kind of be their, mediator and almost like their little mother, being like, stop arguing, figure your shit out. And having that kind of like interaction, you get that in D&D with your players if they're really getting into it. Like you'll have players come at odds with each other, but you can hint at stuff using your NPCs like that and showing like conflict's okay. Like you don't have to be like, we're a ragtag group who's like down for everything. Like sometimes it's cool to have a bit of tension where things aren't really clicking and you got to figure it out. But for me, I mean, I love escapism. I really feel like, come home from a tough day and I tend to ruminate. And if I'm able to just go to another planet, you know what I'm saying? And really escape from everything, it just makes it a lot easier to wind down. And, I'm not thinking about 100 things when I'm trying to go to bed. So those games were perfect for that. They'd get me on another planet. I latch onto the story, and then I blatantly steal all their great ideas, twist them a bit, and pepper them throughout my game. And I really think through their amazing writing, it's helped me kind of see how stories should progress and how you should handle, those cliffhanger events or those left turns. Really helped me out with my writing style.
So is part of that collaborative process of, you said, you mentioned at the beginning about working with other people and taking that inspiration from video games, is that part of it as well, that kind of getting better through being around others? Is that also part of it?
In terms of like writing the story?
In terms of like your own mental health and the way that you feel, right? Like, I mean, like if you're having a crappy day and you can log on to Discord and talk to a couple of your other DM buddies and be like, I have these ideas, like that collaborative space that D&D allows you to have, right?
Oh yeah, I feel like it's almost like you're writing a book that you never know what the next chapter is because you're going to write it on the fly when everyone's together. Mm-hmm. And you can have pieces, you want to have set pieces that will hopefully come together, but they might not, and that's a fun part about it. They could left turn on you, and it's a community when it comes down to it. You're really able to bounce ideas off each other, and I spent a lot of time recently playing Final Fantasy 14, and even the people on that game that I'm part of a group on there, they also some of them play Dungeons and Dragons. So you never know when you're going to find a connection and get some neat ideas from someone else's perspective. Like the internet is a great place. There's so much stuff on there.
Yeah,
people just talking about stuff and putting out ideas and tips, and it's been fantastic.
This is so great. I'm sorry, Wes. I don't want to cut you off, but I'm like, this is spoilers for our future conversation.
Sorry.
That's okay. No, Darren makes a good point. So I'm glad that the CRPGs and D&D and in its extension kind of helped you in that space, because that's important, right? Being able to find a space that you can kind of exist in, even in the crappier moments. Al, let's go back to you next. I believe last time you were on, you talked about Mass Effect, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit more about a different game that matters to you. Unless you want to go back to Mass Effect and tell us more, totally cool. I'll leave it in your court.
I'm so happy that they finally did that remaster and re-released it, so everybody can now enjoy it and love it as much as I do. But I will go on to a new one for a game that matters, and one that is probably my favorite game of all time, and definitely one that has shaped all the way I think about D&D and games in general. And it is the fantastic, best #1 RPG of all time, Chrono Trigger. That game meant so much to me growing up. It was one of the first kind of really story-heavy games that I got into. And in terms of structuring, when I did the first campaign that I played with Wes and Darren, I structured it a lot based on how Chrono Trigger unfolds, having a little bit of a linear start, so you get a little bit of introductions to different parts of the world before trying to open it up into a big open sandbox adventure. But most importantly, that game really taught me that all these different NPCs and side characters can all have their own stories, and they're as vivid or as deep as you want to explore them as. So especially with the time travel mechanic in Chrono Trigger, it was great because you could run into someone in the modern era and it was like this really selfish mayor and he's just kind of a jerk and you think nothing of it. He's just like that. And you go back into the prehistoric not the Middle Ages era, and you go and you see his family was poor, so if you help them out, you give them some food, it teaches them to be more generous and more humble based on the kindness of a stranger. So then you go back to the present, and now this mayor has changed his attitude. So that similar kind of way of your actions earlier in the story can really cascade and butterfly effect out into these seemingly small effects or maybe great, very big changes later on. And especially with kind of the open quest system that they had of just stumbling upon a story here or there. In particular, the one where you regrow the forest in the one of the southern continents. Just things that you could kind of stumble on and find and do. To me, that was the essence of really what I wanted D&D to be. And so I took a lot from that. And that game is just fantastic for the music, for the characters, for the story, the art. It is the time travel game that is timeless to me. And I could do a whole podcast on it, but I'll end it there.
That's a box art quote if I've ever heard one. That's awesome. Well, I'm glad, Al. I'm glad Chrono Trigger still stands with you in such a timeless way. But let's keep this train rolling with a bit of what's new. Darren, I'm going to throw to you first. What's been going on, man? What's new?
Okay, cool. Wes, correct me if I'm wrong. I have a feeling when we ask you, you'll probably mention that you were playing Final Fantasy recently.
Yeah, that's all I've been playing video game wise.
So go right. So then I will not talk about Final Fantasy. I'll leave that to Wes. And this is great because this is an opportunity for us to also shame Matt for not coming back to playing Final Fantasy with us. But so
I'll let him take his time.
Did Darren just cut out for anybody else? He said something about me and then I couldn't hear him anymore. So I'm coming back, man. I promise.
Well, clock's ticking. I did two things. I finished Blasphemous. Took me 25 hours to play the game once. And then I found out when you beat the game, there's entirely new stories that exist only in New Game Plus. And
that's how they get you.
Exactly. And not only that, but there's also 3 entirely different modes contained within New Game Plus. So to experience everything and unlock everything, you actually have to play the game 4 times.
Wow.
And each time you play it, though, it's totally changed. like one way turns it so that your health bar turns into like nodes. So rather than taking like different amounts of damage every time you get hit, it's 1 damage, but you only have 6 health. Another one where it's like your health potions don't heal your health, they only heal your magic. So there's no way for you to heal yourself. And there's like another mode where it's just like when you die, you die. Like it's crazy. Very, very good game. Highly, highly recommend it for any Metroidvania fan out there or anyone who loves the, creepy biblical imagery and Dark Souls. My only complaint is that I would not have figured out how to get the true ending if I didn't look it up online. It's one of the most like obscure ways to actually beat the game. I never would have guessed it. So be prepared to use a guide.
Do you think you're going to go back for the multiple runs?
Maybe in the future, not now. I have a lot of stuff in my backlog, so I want to though. I enjoyed the game enough that I think it would be fun doing the other runs.
I think there's merit in waiting, giving it a couple months and then coming in a little more fresh.
Exactly.
I mean?
Exactly. Except not only will I be fresh, I'll also be rusty, and it'll be even harder.
There you go.
Fresh and rusty. That's the big 2 things you want to be in anything: fresh and rusty.
And then the last thing I did was I pretty much played start to finish. I haven't beaten it yet, but I'm on the last dungeon. I played through the Switch remake of Link's Awakening, just out of the blue.
Okay.
I have a super big soft spot in my heart for Link's Awakening as a Zelda game, because I don't think there is any Zelda game really like it. It is without a doubt the most challenging Zelda game from a puzzle perspective. The whole game world is like one big puzzle, and some things are really hard to figure out. Thankfully, the game has a very, very good hint system where whenever you need help, you just find a tree with a telephone on it. You walk inside that tree and there's a rotary dial phone for you to the game tell you where you got to go next. I use that quite a lot. But I love that remake way more than I thought it would. It's really beautiful, like gorgeously beautiful, but I still don't think it's worth the full price of $80. And like they just padded out the runtime with like randomly generated dungeons or user generated dungeons where the only user is yourself. And I'm doing them all. I'm getting 100%, but like it's padding because the game start to finish is only like 8 hours long. So
yeah,
without that padding. But if you get it on sale, like one of the freaking best remakes, one of the best Zelda games, absolutely love it.
Nice. Well, I'm glad. We'll have to get your updated thoughts next week when you finish it and see if it holds up, unless you decide to hate it in the last 5 minutes of the game. Al, let's go to you next. What's new? What's been going on?
I've been trying to catch up. I've taken a month and a bit break from Final Fantasy XIV, but I'm coming back this week. And in the interim, I've been trying to catch up on some games that I hadn't quite finished, that I hit like the back third of. So the first one that I'm now finishing off, and I think I'm actually in the last chapter, but knowing that means I probably have another 50 hours, is Trails of Cold Steel 3.
Yeah!
Which I love. The series is fantastic, but it is super long. But the story is really getting interesting, especially they have this always final act, big revelation, lots of information, kind of turns the game upside down. So that's where I'm at now. And simultaneously with that, for when I want my turn-based stuff, I'm playing Trails of Cold Steel. When I want to delve into that action, I am now finally finishing off Astral Chain on Switch,
nice.
which is just a really cool cyberpunk cop, rule of cool to the extreme action game that I'm thoroughly enjoying. Stylistically, like design-wise, the menus and stuff are the closest I've seen that I've had them as much fun with as like Persona 5, where Persona 5, you got that red and black kind of explosive graphic design. And for Astral Chain, because we're playing a kind of supernatural cop, it's kind of very blocky, but it's a blue and white kind of color scheme and still just stands out really visually. But lots of like timing combos, button mashing and dodging and timing windows, and I'm loving it. And that similarly had like a top 10 anime betrayals type of moment that I just hit, that I'm in the, I think like chapter 9 or 10 and trying finishing off towards that I'm really loving. So those have been the 2 games I've been playing so far.
It's actually really good. I actually played and finished it as well back when it came out. Al and I were playing a little bit concurrently at one point. It's a great game. I think it was criminally slept on, actually.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll give that as a shout out. If you have a Switch and you need something new and you want something a bit more actiony, definitely recommend Astral Chain.
Yeah,
Nice.
it's really good fun. Nice. Wes, what about you? What's been going on? What's new in the world of Final Fantasy?
Oh, so I am notorious for, if I'm playing any games, it's a game. And I play it real hard and nothing else
You
until
destroy
it's
the
beaten.
game.
And when that game is an MMO, you can't beat it.
There's no
You
way.
just keep playing it forever. I'm really enjoying it. It is probably, it's one of 3 MMOs I've played. I come from RuneScape background.
Yeah!
Shout out.
RuneScape.
Wow.
I got married in RuneScape. What up? I was like 12 years old. It was awesome. It could have been another 8-year-old boy. Whatever. It was crazy. And then, developed from there. We've got into Guild Wars, played 1 and 2, loved it. But Final Fantasy has been a very pleasant surprise. The music directing is on fire. Boss battle themes, they're all different. They got themes for all the zones. I'm in a band. I appreciate music. I really like what they did here. And I found, the combat system is relatively easy. It's not that engaging. A little bit of throwing some shade here, but that's important because end game, you have to pay so much attention at specific positioning to not die immediately that the combo, if it was complicated, you'd get, you'd have tendinitis and it'd be horrible. You don't want carpal tunnel, right? So they keep it like, you're pressing 1, 2, and 3 a lot, whatever. But really engaging visuals, and it's been a blast. I was surprised that I stuck on this long. Usually I get to near the end and things fizzle out, but having a social group that does stuff together has been really fun. And it's been a fantastic ride. I'm looking forward to the expansion coming out in a few months. Endwalker, I think, is coming out in November.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited for that. It's been a good ride.
Do you have a rough hour count? How long? I think Darren, last we heard from you was like what, 800?
Yeah.
Do you have a rough hour count, Wes?
I'm probably reaching that number.
Nice.
At this point,
I think you probably passed that number, to be honest.
Still not as much time as I put into Skyrim, but we'll see. We'll see if I pass there. Like I said, man, I go hard. Like if there's any ability to put your own creative energy into it, it goes way out of control. So at least the MMO can't have that. When I could mod things, it got out of control. I just like the gates open and the infinite was possible, so it just became a mess. But at least with this, I can't do that, so it's a little bit rein me in.
And once again, a shout out to our free company, Ashes of Yore. Come check us out if you want to come play with us. We're on the Leviathan server. And Wes, you weren't kidding about the difficulty. Like, last night, we were fighting a boss for 2 hours.
Puts Dark Souls to shame.
Yeah, still did not beat it. After 2 hours of grinding that fight, we did not beat it. It's difficult.
Yeah, and it's enjoyable difficulty, right? Because I feel like for Dark Souls, I've never played them, but I know there's a lot of memes about them. You're experiencing that difficulty by yourself. When you have 8 people all effing up, it's a big deal. There's a lot of pride when all of you make it through. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's usually because one person is better. Yeah. I'm usually carried, but whatever. It's
you and me both, man. You and me both. I was not keeping people alive. Anyways, sorry,
okay.
Matt.
I'm gonna
what have
come.
you been up to?
Well,
sorry.
Hang
Hal,
on. I had one question while we're on the Final Fantasy, and Darren, maybe you can refresh this answer for me. But I believe there was someone on this podcast that said that they would make it to Endwalker before it comes out, and I don't think it was you, and I don't think it was Destiny. So,
You're
Matt,
right.
do you think you're still going to make it to Endwalker?
Watch it happen. It might be at like 11:59 p.m. the night before Endwalker comes out. I'm gonna hit that last cutscene.
MSQ,
I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna make it.
All right.
I'm gonna make it. Watch.
Super impressive if you do. I will.
You guys all know how fast I play games. I'm gonna get there. Don't you worry.
Okay.
I believe in you. Just sleepless nights. That's all it takes.
Yeah, Matt. What have you been up to other than not playing Final Fantasy?
I have been playing a bunch of Mario Golf, the new one, Super Rush. It's a great time. Yeah, very important because actually I'm playing in a tournament with a bunch of other content creators and influencers. So if you're curious, last weekend, so when this podcast goes live on Wednesday, last weekend we had our first round, and I actually made it out of the first round. So if you want to go, see that VOD, you can find it at look up Please Be Excited. They are a fantastic content creator, and they're the ones hosting. So go check them out. I'll make sure the links are in the post below. But if you're hearing this within the first couple of days that it comes out, the finals are going to be on Saturday, July 10th. So if you're listening, in the first couple of days, come support. We're doing a bunch of fundraising for Extra Life. All the money is going to children's hospitals. So come, show up. There's been so much shit talking, and things have gotten so out of hand. There's now an organization of mats who have banded together to kind of go against everybody else in the tournament. Our good friend Aaron from Awesomely Average and Speaking of Stadia now has to be Damon for a week because he lost his bet against us, the NMO, the new mat order. So come check us out on Saturday. The game itself, it's fantastic multiplayer. The single player is hot garbage. But as
is
a
it
game
really that bad?
It's not great. It's really not great.
Oh, shame.
I'm probably spent like 3 or 4 hours with it, and it's literally like, go here, do this, go here, do this, and sometimes they just like throw things at you just because. And especially after playing Golf Story, which had such a fantastic single player golf campaign, this one's crap. But the multiplayer is really fun. Like, we were just up at the cottage with my family, and like everyone except for my mom got involved, including my dad. Like, there was one point where we were playing up until like 1 a.m, and my brother and I were too tired to go on. He's like, set it up for me. I'm playing by myself. And he played for another like 2 hours by himself until like 3 a.m. So the game itself mechanically is fantastic. It's a Mario Golf game. It's hard to screw that up. But the single player leaves a lot to be desired. I would not recommend picking it up if you don't have people to play with, whether that's online, whether that's locally, whatever, because a lot of my enjoyment has been playing with others or getting ready for this tournament. It's mechanically great, but yeah, I wouldn't recommend it if you don't have people to play with. And the other thing that I just literally dipped my toes in an hour before the podcast was Forza Horizon 4. I just got my new PC. I got a great Game Pass deal. I got like a Game Pass for like 3 months for $1. So Darren, after our E3 coverage and you and I being like, yay, Forza, I guess, I decided to jump in. I was like, you know what? I want to see how good this computer is. I want to see how well it can run stuff. And like, I was able to run it at like ultra without any issues, which was shocking for me. I've never had a computer this good. And the game itself, like, pleasantly blown away. Like, the intro is fantastic. It's super, super engaging. The racing feels great. I'm actually genuinely excited to go back and play more of it. Like, I haven't played a good racing game since like Need for Speed Underground.
Got a question.
Yeah.
When you crash, does everything blow up in a satisfying way?
I haven't crashed that hard yet, but there's a very satisfying rewind button to, eliminate your mistakes.
To avoid those.
I'm all about, like, I suck at racing games, so you better have that crash physics down, and I'm into it. I'm like, now we're talking.
I agree.
I haven't, like I said, I've only done a couple races so far, but like the opening is fantastic. It's much more cinematic than I think I was expecting. And like, yeah, I'm actually genuinely excited to go back into it. And there's like a whole list of Game Pass games now that I have like downloaded and I'm like just ready to jump into. If anybody's curious, I haven't played it yet, but Bug Fables is currently like at the top of my list. It's like almost like a Paper Mario game, but you're bugs. It just came out. Early reactions seem to be positive. So if you're looking for a cool indie game on Game Pass, go check it out. But yeah, that's I'll have much more Game Pass and more gaming news for myself next week. But let's get into it because we have Wes and Al on the show today to talk to us about D&D. We are all, well, I mean, you three much more than I are big D&D fans. I love playing when I can get in. All three of you, Darren, yeah, you as well, have all DM'd to some capacity before. And D&D is a game, I think, unlike any other. The creativity that goes into it and what you're able to do with it is just wild. So, Darren, I'm going to throw to you to start this discussion because you brought up saying, I want to have a D&D conversation. I'm going to throw to you. We have our experts on. What is it about D&D? What do you want to talk about?
Yeah, so I've been wanting to have a D&D episode for so long, but I didn't want to have it until I could have both Wes and Alistair on because of our experience playing D&D together. So I want to throw to both of you. We'll start with Alistair first, and then we'll go to Wes after. I think my first question is just what makes you want to play D&D, and like, how is it different than the stereotype and stigma that it normally has?
You mean the Satanic Panic?
Well, maybe not satanic panic. That's true. That is.
I
a
love
stereotype
summoning
to have.
demons. It's the best
Well,
part.
all of those rumors are true.
Yeah,
And I now have Asmodeus under my direct control.
Why is so yeah, what is it that you like about D&D that makes you keep coming back to it, and why is it not a game exclusively for like neckbeards with no lives?
I think what really drew me to the game, or what I love about it more than anything, is that it is a completely unique experience that is shared by you and the people you play with. And even if you played with those same people a week later and tried to play the same campaign, you're going to get a completely different experience every time. And nobody else can go through what that table went through that day, that afternoon, that evening. Just the way people are feeling that day, the way the DM brings something to the table, the way someone might respond to something. We're all so different with all of our backgrounds and the way we think about something that when you present a problem or a scene to someone, you never know exactly how they're going to react. And so D&D is the best for that to me because it's just pure creativity and unique expression every time. There's something really great about playing a video game and everyone gets to experience that same moment and it's presented to them that way, and everyone may react a little bit differently, but then it's kind of one-sided. You don't necessarily get to give back in the same way that a D&D table does for you.
Yeah.
So that's my unique love for it. And then in terms of what makes it different from the kind of stereotypical ideas is that it's a game for literally everyone because it's just about playing and imagining. So whatever your interests are, whether it's the more mathematical side of building a character that can do high damage, whether it's the creative problem solving and solutions in a social situation or in puzzle style situations and riddles or exploration and theme and character development, whatever you are interested in, you can tailor the game to fit that. So like I know from the DM subreddits that I visit, there are a lot of historians that love playing D&D because you get to write history out of it. There's min-maxers that like to play just for killing monsters, and it's a lot of fun. And then there's a lot of actors that play because they get to really inhabit the mind of a character. So whatever your kind of interest is, you can make it whatever you want it to. And so I guess my one piece of advice for anyone playing D&D would be just figure out what your expectations are with your table so that you guys can maximize your fun output with what everybody wants to have fun with, if that makes sense.
Right. That's awesome. No, I completely agree. It's nothing like I think how the media normally portrays it. It's like a super creative, engaging, and as long as you've got the right people that you're playing with, a very welcoming experience and a very exciting experience. And now Wes, because I changed my mind. I don't want you answering the same question. I want you to get a chance to provide something unique because I feel like you probably just agree with a lot of the stuff that Alistair just said.
Pretty much.
My question for you then is what was your first like magical moment playing D&D where everything clicked and you knew that this was something special?
Well, I think it's that like, you know when you watch an amazing episode of TV and you think about it for like 5 days and you're like, oh man, I really want to like, I want to see what happens next. Like that's the feeling I get almost, I would say without doubt, every single time after playing D&D. It's never over when you finish. There's always room for something else to happen. And it's that like anticipation of this grand unfolding adventure that is nobody knows what happens next. Like literally nobody does. Yeah. And that's what it was for me. It was like when I get back together, like, and sometimes it takes like a month and you're just like, your whole, like, it's something to look forward to. It to me, I equate it to like breaking up, the monotony of life. You book a vacation, you're really looking forward to that. It's like that. It's like in a week I get to finally figure out like, what's gonna happen next with that one thing. I got my own like TV shows going on when you have these upcoming episodes. It's a great episodic, slowly unraveling thread that you experience with, I've always played with people I know already, with friends, but you can meet people through that as well. Like we play in a campaign where there's lots of people I didn't know before I joined, and there's probably a bunch of listeners that have tried that experience. As long as the group's welcoming, that's the whole thing. Communication is key. You need to talk to your friends who are playing and the dungeon master, let them know what you're looking for, right? Nothing can help you better than telling people what you want, and then you'll get it. Everyone wants it to be an amazing time for everybody. But I think it was that knowledge that no story like this exists anywhere else. No, like, video games are ones and zeros. They're going to guide you, and you can guide it to a certain degree to get an outcome. But in Dungeons and Dragons, it's literally infinite. Like, the outcome is not ever preordained. It's going to evolve and mutate as it goes. And I love that amorphous group improv. It's just so cool.
I think something that D&D does incredibly well, Darren, to kind of go back to your point of, the neckbeards and so on and so forth. I think the accessibility of Dungeons and Dragons is something that isn't really played up enough, I think. Just because, like, a lot of people who are curious about a certain video game or are curious about a certain type of medium, there's always a barrier to entry, whether it be a controller, whether it be whatever else, right? Dungeons and Dragons, like, all you need is a pen and a paper at the end of the day, right? Like, everything else can kind of be massaged out and figured out, but like, if you have any inkling to be any sort of creative, right? Like, you don't need to know which sword does more damage against which armor. You don't need to worry about controlling a camera on a thumbstick. You don't need to worry about any of that, right? It's just kind of like, if you're with the right DM, and obviously the DM has to be aware of you being a new player going into that, which most people I think are totally fine with. You saying like, can I do that, just becomes a question of, okay, look at the sheet in front of you. Do you think this number is high enough to pull it off? And the dungeon master can kind of work with you to try and figure out whether you can or if you can't do it. I think it's an incredibly accessible game that just has a really bad rap for being like a bunch of bros and neckbeards sitting in a basement at their mom's house, right? I just don't think that, like, the
it's more what Community did. Community is more of what reality looks like with D&D. Like, you're hanging out in a room, you're all of different walks of life. Some of you are more extroverted, some of you are more introverted, and you try to give everyone their moment.
So something that I want to ask all of you then, because all of you have been a DM at one point or another, and for anybody who might be unaware of the terminology, a DM is a dungeon master. They're the person essentially that's leading the game, and they're almost like the godlike figure in the role, helping you kind of go through the story to some extent, right? So what I want to ask all three of you, and Darren, I'm going to ask you first. How do you handle a person, and again, whether this is in character or not, taking a massive left turn from where you're expecting things to go, right? Because then I think it's more improv that kind of comes into play. But how do you handle that situation where you're expecting things to go one way, and because of your merry band of travelers, shit goes wildly left? Like, how do you handle that?
Yeah. So, and for the record, I'm going to be honest, because I've only been a DM, a dungeon master, one time in Korea with you, Matt. And so my expertise is a little light, and I guess I could throw it on to Wes and Alistair after I mention to see what they think, because they have a lot more experience than I do. But I think the key thing, and also what attracted me to being a DM, is that storytelling and that improvisation. Like, you have a story that you want to tell, but the whole point of a game is to make sure that your players are having fun. If your players are not having fun, then what's the point? So if they're going to take a massive left turn, which when we played, Matt, you guys certainly did.
You bring up strawberry milk one time.
Yeah, you bring up strawberry milk one time. You bring up a wheel of cheese one time, and everybody wants to see this wheel of cheese on the wall. Mind you, that's my fault because I pointed it out. I think the biggest left turn was we had a dungeon, and it had a bunch of encounters and then a boss fight. And it was getting pretty late, and then we're getting to the boss fight, and I don't think people were losing interest, I could tell. And then one of the party members used Charm Person on the boss. And rules wise, Charm Person should not have really worked on the boss, because he was, I think he was like a hobgoblin or something like that. He wasn't something that was necessarily like considered like a person. But I decided, screw it. It worked, because it got everyone's life back into it. Everybody got like, oh my God. So now they're trying to like be friends with this boss, and they're trying to like work through it. So if someone's trying to throw a curveball at you, just do whatever you can to just either wrap it somehow back into the story or just follow along and don't take it so seriously. But
Yeah,
I think
What do you? Sorry, Darren, finish your point.
I was gonna also pass it on to Alistair and Wes. I
Yeah.
guess we'll start with Alistair first. It's like I was purposely planning a 1-day campaign. It probably works very differently if you've got a big story arc that you have written out.
For sure. But I think Darren hit the nail on the head. Like, you want to maximize fun at the table.
Mhm.
If a player catches on to something, especially if you're DMing and it's one of your quiet players, lean into it as hard as you can, because that's something that piqued their interest. So the one that's most memorable for me from the campaign and playing with all three of you right now, was you guys were going into someone's house to try and get some information from them. And so I thought, okay, if they're going to this house, what could be something that could happen? I improved, what if this guy had a cat and they open the door and the cat runs out? So if he comes back and maybe his cat's missing, one of the players was quick on the uptake, said, I want to grab the cat. I said, okay. And then they decided to keep the cat. And so now I've developed this whole running long storyline of who this cat was. It's secretly a warlock that's been cursed and transformed into a cat. And now it's a running part of the story that I had no plans for, but it's something that the party created themselves. And if you can try and stoke that interest and make that into something and lean into it as much as you can, keep doing that. Always try, it's that old improv rule of yes and.
Yes,
And that doesn't
indeed.
mean always agreeing to whatever the players do, because that is a very slippery slope. But if you can come to like thematically say yes and use that idea and leverage it into something more, then you get to keep building on what their interest is, what their input is, and that's what makes everything more unique. When you play at a table, you're sitting with 3+ more people. You will never be as smart as all the people at the table combined. So always try and combine everyone's interests and everyone's inputs, and you will get something that's always bigger than the sum of its parts, for sure.
Mhm.
So Wes, I'm gonna pull a Darren here because he changed the question on you last time, and I'm gonna do the same thing here because I feel like we've had some good input here. But I'm very curious to ask because DMing is something that I think is very I'm for blanking on a word here. It looks really fucking hard. You know what I mean? Like, it's something that I've always been curious about trying, but I think the kind of, the wall looks so high that I don't even want to start trying to scale it. So for somebody who maybe has played a bunch of D&D or has heard about it and wants to try their hand at DMing, what's some advice or some tips that you can give to someone who's looking to get into that space, or even just D&D in general? But give me a couple for DMing and give me a couple for just getting into the game.
So I didn't necessarily. I mean, there's lots of different ways to go about this. I have a very, I guess, I don't know, maybe it's unique. It probably isn't, but I started by designing a map, and now I have a place to set everything in. I enjoy, make believe cartography. I find it really fun, and once you have a map together, you can start to have different areas with different cultures, and you can kind of just go, okay, I got this basic framework. Let's pick a interesting spot on the map. Literally, like roll a dice on the page, and wherever it lands, you're like, we're starting here. We're starting here. Okay, cool. We got that. So you don't need to have everything written to start the game.
Mhm.
You are going to plan a session that you think will take one session that will take 4 sessions. So your session 1, that if you start a plan like, okay, this is going to happen, you need a hook, right? Everyone needs a hook. You need one thing to happen, and then the game rolls from there. So for example, mine was the players are at my world. I kind of came up with centers around a planet circled by 3 colored moons that eclipse, and like magical stuff happens when the moons eclipse. So the players on day 1 during the first session of the campaign, a moon eclipses. They're at a festival. Everyone's having a party. It's celebrated like you would New Year's or something like that. And big bad evil guy teleports in, steals the mayor, summons a bunch of demons, like chaos ensues, and now plot is hooked. Like, where are these demons coming from? Why did they take the mayor? Like, you want to have questions that are asked, and it literally will write itself from there. Like, you kind of, if you imagine like in a video game, it renders as you walk through it, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what you're doing. you can get granular with it, and you will, just out of interest. You'll be like, oh, I want to spice this town up. If you get, feeling it one day and you want to write into it. But that's how I do it. I just kind of invent as I go. I find it a really relaxing thing to do on a Saturday afternoon. If it's raining, start writing some D&D, and I'll find music that I put on and to kind of get me in the mood, and I'll just go. But there's modules you can buy or find online that are the story, and you can just run them and get an idea of like, how does being a DM? I've never done this. I probably should, but it runs you through a professionally written, designed to flow narrative, gives you the NPCs, gives you what they say and what their personalities are, and just sets you up to be able to run a pre-rendered story. And it will not go as planned because it's D&D, but at least it gives you, okay, if they do X and Y, here's this, or if they kill this guy, then this will happen. It gives you enough to run with. And I think that's the easiest way to get started if you've never done it before. Before you DM, you should probably play just to get an idea of like how it works, what the pacing's like. You want to try to make sure that everyone at the table is getting a turn to do something in relatively quick succession. And I find too, like keeping the game size a little smaller, like to 4 or 5 people, is better. Simply because it is a turn-based game, and you really don't want to have too much of that in combat. If you minimize combat, everyone's taking their turns at the same time because you're just chatting through stuff, right?
Yeah.
But there's lots of ways to start out with it. I mean, Reddit's a good spot to look to. And if you're really interested, if anyone listening is interested in DMing, check out some professional games. Like look up Critical Role with Matt Mercer. Absolutely incredible. Just it helps you see like where he comes from in terms of setting things up. And I highly recommend checking out that podcast show if you're into that kind of thing.
Nice. Well, I think that's it. I just think it's such a difficult thing to think about, and it's one of those things, like we've talked a lot about, doing anything you have to just kind of start. Something that I want to ask all of you, because I feel like you guys have a lot of unique experience between Final Fantasy, we're just talking about MMOs, and D&D, right? Both of which function largely dependent on the community that you're in. So I wanted to ask, and Darren, I'll throw to you first, how do you think those communities are different or the same, and how do you think the experience between something like an MMO and a D&D game or session or whatever, how do those align and don't at the same time?
Oh, that's an interesting question. And also, for the record, I would like to just follow up and double what Wes said about just getting into it, focusing on, if you want to start a campaign, focus on what you find interesting and tell that story. If you're into maps, maybe design something around maps. If you're into storytelling, write a story. If you're into just like role play, maybe do something lighter that's just kind of like theater of the mind where you're chatting a lot. And I think that's also kind of what's different between like an MMO community versus like a tabletop community, is that an MMO community doesn't really offer a lot of choice or options. Like I love Final Fantasy, and I think Final Fantasy is almost like an easier way to meet people because everyone's got this common interest around a game that's designed in one way, and the story's really good, and there's stuff that's engaging, and it's keeping you through it. But it will never really change, or it'll never be exactly the way that you can make it. Whereas with D&D, unfortunately, it is gated by the people that you know. You need to find some people that are willing to try it out with you. You've got to find, if none of your party and yourself have never played a game before, someone has to be the dungeon master, and people are going to have to be patient while that person works through the rules themselves. And in that case, you should definitely maybe think about getting a pre-made. I used a pre-made when I DM'd. But ultimately, you get an experience that cannot be replicated. It is 100% unique to you and you alone, because it's the people that you're playing with that are working together to make that community, to make that story. And so it's kind of special to have something that no one else in the world has access to except you. Only you and your friends can have that moment.
Awesome. I think that's so true, and I think it's entirely dependent on the people around, because like my favorite D&D game to this day was the first one that Al ran for us way back when at, we were at a friend's mutual cottage, and there was so much alcohol involved that things took such a ridiculous turn so quickly. But then like Al had people like set up in different rooms to have private conversations. Like everything was just so chaotic, but it was the group that we played with. And not to say that there hasn't been better sessions since, but that was probably my favorite just because of how ridiculous it was. And it was our first for a lot of us. But I'm going to change my mind again, and I'm going to, because we're starting to run long here a bit. But I want to ask Al, and I'll go to Wes as well. I'm going to ask you guys both the same question because I think it's important. Therapeutic D&D is a thing, and we're actually working on talking to someone to come onto the show to talk to us about how kind of therapeutic D&D functions. So what I want to ask you guys is, what do you think are the mental health benefits of something like D&D? Like, how do you think it can actually improve your well-being or your community or whatever else? What do you think are some of the, or personally or generally speaking, what are some of the benefits, the mental health benefits of D&D? I'll ask you first.
Yeah, I think you can always see this from a couple of sides, from the player side or the DM side for sure. For me, I get a lot of mental health help and relaxation from DMing because it gives me that creative output where I can kind of just sit and get to think through things and be creative, and then at the end of it say, look, this is something I made, and then get to enjoy that experience with friends. But I think it is really important, and we've stressed it a few times, but making sure that you really are a welcoming table and you have a really welcoming and encouraging community that you're playing with. To kind of like weave it back in with the Final Fantasy question, it's if you could play Final Fantasy 14 but have the devs and code writers in the room with you to change things on the fly, just you're not feeling up to the running your mechanics that day, so you don't want to stress about button pushing, so you change it and you focus it more on the storytelling. So being able to make those adjustments, I think, is also super helpful from a mental health perspective. You can when you're designing a game as a DM, always talk to your players, let them know what you're thinking of doing. If you're a player, tell your DM a little bit about what you're expecting so that you can have that sense of safety and comfort when you come to play, so that if it is your escapism and that's one of the things you really enjoy about it, then it's not going to creep up and surprise you in an unexpected way that you're not willing to be a part of, kind of idea. So having that kind of creative outlet and then having that open, safe community of expression, I think is really good for kind of a therapeutic process, for sure.
Wes, what do you think?
Yeah. I think it can also really help with, certain people that get out of their shell if they have that, if they're feeling, if you're in again, all depends on the people you're with. But I find every time I've played it, groups with someone who's a little more like introverted or shy, gently having things kind of placed there or to kind of get them into engage with, or tailoring things to certain players, like it can really let people engage maybe when they might have been more shy, and it kind of experience social interaction that's going to be stress free. Like you're just hanging out with, you're among friends all the time. It's really helpful in that sense. I also think it's just like the same kind of camaraderie you get from a sports team. Like you're all doing a thing together. You're overcoming a goal. You're overcoming something together, like you would in a sports team. You could win, you can lose, but I feel like it gives you that sense of community. I really think it's something I honestly feel like every young person, 12 or 13, should give it a go in drama class or in school somehow. Like it is literally improv. That's what it is. And I feel like it's really empowering. You can do things that you cannot do in reality. You can slay dragons. You can ride on airships and like have a epic pirate battle 500 feet above the ground. Like it's the same thing. You play video games to do things you can't do in real life. Well, here you get to do it in a room with other people. And I think the best way to play D&D is live with everyone in the same room. I've been doing a ton of, obviously with COVID, it's always been online, and it's just such a better experience to be there in the room. And it has that social kind of storytelling as a group. And now that you have these shared memories with each other, you're going to become friends. You have shared experiences, like, the same kind of analogy. If you were with the sports team, you're going to become friends because of your shared experiences. It's just great for that.
Wes, can I do you one better and say video games let you do stuff you can't do in real life? D&D and tabletop role-playing games let you do stuff you can't do in video games.
Yes.
Ooh,
Yeah.
nice,
It's true.
Darren.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's not because you're not hemmed in by someone else's hard coded ones and zeros.
Yeah.
It's happening right now, right? That's the thing about it. It's being coded as you speak.
I think part of it, at least personally, I think having that ability to be whoever it is you want to be is also something important, because I mean, you're locked into your life to some extent, right? I mean, you're in your place, and be it societal, monetary or whatever other circumstances, you are where you are, and that's your life. D&D gives you that kind of ability to be whoever it is you want to be at whatever point in time that you want to be at. So I think that's also really, at least for me personally, it's an important thing to be able to kind of have that kind of like, this is a different kind of life that I can kind of live myself in a little bit. But Darren, I think your quote is the perfect way to end this conversation. Can you give it to us one more time? Because I actually really, really liked it.
Video games let you do stuff you can't do in real life. Tabletop role-playing games let you do stuff you can't do in video games.
Perfect. Go on Reddit, find a community. There are lots and lots of ways to play D&D online. And like Wes said, it's fantastic doing it in person, but given circumstances, sometimes you can't do that. Find a community online, go to Reddit, go to different places, and see if you can play some D&D if you want to. But guys, we need to talk about some news. We have talked a lot about Final Fantasy XIV, so we are going to jump into this news story first, and then let's kind of keep it a little brief. But I thought this was a really, really interesting one. I'm going to be pulling from IGN from Adele Anchors. Adele writes, Final Fantasy XIV just broke its Steam player records without releasing anything new. Final Fantasy XIV has hit a new peak concurrent player count on Steam, despite there being no expansions or events to generate such a spike. As reported by PC Gamer, the 8-year-old MMORPG managed to break its concurrent player count again this past weekend, peaking at 47,542 players in the last 24 hours. The latest peak in Final Fantasy XIV's player count marks a substantial increase on the game's previous record of 41,200, which was back in June 2020. Adele goes on to basically say that there seems to be a lot of eyes on the game right now, especially because the new World of Warcraft expansion is taking time, or there's something going on there. So a lot of people have their eyes on a different space. So, I mean, we're all big fans of Final Fantasy XIV here. It seems to continue to be better. So what I want to ask you guys, and in just 2 or 3 sentences, because I don't want to dig too far into it, what do you want Final Fantasy XIV to be after Endwalker? Because Endwalker seemingly is kind of like the finale, in quotes, of whatever arc things are going on, as far as I understand. Where do you want to see Final Fantasy XIV go after Endwalker? Wes, I'm going to ask you first.
I want to get like Zoolander fashion competitions. Like that's I want walk-offs, man. Where are the walk-offs at? Let's get that going.
Al, what about you?
Well, they're taking us to the moon, so I don't really have any complaints. They're kind of giving me everything. I'm happy for whatever they're willing to give and share. I think they've more than earned that, and I think that's reflected in the player base. Yeah, I'm just along for the ride. I will be happy to go wherever they take me.
Darren?
Yeah, man, I'm pretty happy with where it is. I guess just like
don't release Endwalker.
I don't, honestly. But yeah, I mean, just keep the story going, make it really good. Maybe if I could wave a wand, give us like some kind of practice mode for Savage Extreme content where we can like practice mechanics. Although I guess that would make
it's called dying.
Yeah, it's called dying, I guess. But yeah, it's great.
Nice. Well, I mean, it continues to kind of set records, and it's free for the first little while. So if you're curious about Final Fantasy XIV, go check it out. Our next news story is one that I'm very curious to hear Darren's thoughts on. Coming from Eurogamer, written by Tom Phillips, The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword HD enhancements detailed. Excuse me. Nintendo has released a trailer detailing the handful of enhancements coming to The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword HD. Expect Fee, the sword spirit, to pop up less often, the game to bother you with item notifications less frequently, game progress to be saved automatically, along with 60 frames per second, and you can also speed up text dialogue and opt out of some of the game's tutorials. Darren, I understand that Skyward Sword is a bit of a divisive game in the Legend of Zelda, fandom. How do you feel about the changes being made to Skyward Sword? Is it enough to make what some people would consider the worst Zelda game, quote unquote, good.
If what they said is actually true, and Fi is really optional and does not actually interrupt you other than for like the story moments she's supposed to. And with them adding, removal of constant tutorial prompts and constant information, like that actually would make a significant difference in my enjoyment of the game. Like those things were actually so obtrusive that they added a lot to my disenjoyment with the game. So like if that's true, like I'm actually happy. Like that's almost enough for me. It's still not worth, 79.99 Canadian. It's definitely still not worth that, but I would actually replay it, and I think that alone would make me like the game better.
Nice, yeah. Skyward Sword is one I've always been curious about, so I'm happy to hear that you think that this could be enough to kind of make it great. I'm curious to check it out when it comes. Our next story is going to IGN, written by Matt T.M. Kim. Ghost of Tsushima Director's Cut and Iki Island expansion announced for PS5 and PS4. Upgrade prices revealed. Ghost of Tsushima Director's Cut has been announced for both PS4 and PS5. This updated version will include PS5 specific enhancements, plus a new Iki Island expansion. The Director's Cut will come to both consoles on August 20th. If you are interested, PS4 players can get an upgrade to the Director's Cut for $19.99. PS4 owners who want to upgrade to the PS5 version will be $9.99. If you have the original PS4 copy that you want to go to the director's copy on PS5, that's $29.99. And if you're buying it for the first time, the game will be $70 on PS5 or $60 on PS4. And this is American pricing, obviously, so expect a bit of a difference. Al, you and I are big Ghost of Tsushima fans. Is what they're doing with these new director's cut, adding in everything that they've done so far, a new expansion, is this enough for you to kind of pay that extra fee to jump into Tsushima again?
I think it is, because they added that whole multiplayer section for free, and it is pretty fantastic. And Darren and I have been running through part of the raid, and we haven't finished it yet, but I've been thoroughly enjoying it. So I don't mind that they're coming back with like kind of an added on scenario here, because they added on for free before and gave me some good hours of experience there, and I think the game is really solid. So I'm definitely curious to check it out. But yeah, it's piqued my curiosity and it has my attention.
Darren, I want to ask you then, how much does it make? How bullshit is it that you have to pay for upgrades?
Yeah, like we gotten really used to just getting free upgrades, especially with a game like Ghost of Tsushima that came out so late into the PS4 life cycle that I really expected with that game we would get a free upgrade. I wish that, like, I know it comes with extra content, so I'm not expecting extra content for free. I'm happy to pay for an expansion, but like really all they're getting from PS4 to PS5 that's not the new content is like adaptive triggers and some better resolution. Like I wish they did a Final Fantasy VII approach where you got the upgrade free and then just had to pay for the content. I think that would have been much better.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think it's like you said, the PS5 features are stuff like, lip sync for both English and Japanese voiceovers. You get the haptic feedback, you get the audio load times targeting at 60 frames per second, et cetera, et cetera. But I agree with you. I think it's pretty ridiculous that if you buy the director's cut on PS4, there's still a fee to go to the director's cut on PS5, which is only giving you those PS5 enhancements. Like in my mind, if you own the director's cut in one place, you should have that same access. I don't really have much of an issue paying for the extra content if I only own the base game to go to the director's cut. I think that's fine. Like you said, Final Fantasy VII just did that, giving you all the Yuffie stuff. So I don't really have an issue for paying for the extra content. I do think it's pretty ridiculous to make you pay the extra, $10 USD just to go from director's cut to director's cut across PS4 and PS5. That's something that Xbox just seems to be doing way better.
And I guess I can add on and clarify, PS5s are still nowhere in sight, so that extra fee is still nowhere in sight in my mind. But yeah, not great, but at least they're giving us more games, so we'll see.
Yeah, I am really, really excited to jump into the island of Iki. I loved Ghost of Tsushima. I platinumed it, and I'm not one for platinuming games at all. So I'm really excited to jump back into that world, and I know I'm going to end up paying for it anyway. But it's just, oh god, I wish I didn't have to pay just for the PS5 enhancements, but we both know I'm going to. Now we're going into a bit, I guess continuing a bit of a PlayStation rock block. This one's coming from IGN. There's 2 articles I'm going to be pulling from. Just to summarize, Sony has now bought Housemarque, the developers of Returnal, and they also have bought Nixes, which is a PC port studio. They've handled a lot of Square Enix's PC ports, and Sony has now just acquired both of them. So I'm going to kind of go in a bit of a roundtable here thing, because I have a question for each of you. Al, you haven't been one for playing a lot of Housemarque games. I think you've seen how Returnal's running, but you do know that this is a studio that has made PlayStation games a long time. Does this news do anything for you? Are you stoked that they bought Housemarque? Where are your feelings at this?
I don't think I have any feelings about this currently.
That's totally fine. I think it's about time. We've been waiting for a long time. Housemarque has been making fantastic stuff. Wes, to ask you then, they've now bought Nixes, which is a Swedish studio dedicated to bringing games to PC. Does this news, this theoretical, promise of more PlayStation first-party games coming to PC, does that do anything for you? Because that's the only way that I can see why they would be buying the studio. Would you be more inclined to play games on PC?
I've only played games on PC.
Yeah.
I feel like they're going to have their exclusives. No question about it. It doesn't make much sense in my mind to hire these or buy this company and not have them port things to PC like they've always done. Mm-hmm. If it's specifically Square Enix games, awesome. Like if I can pick things up for PC, and if they have cross-platform, which is the coolest thing ever, mm-hmm. I'm all about it. I know you guys are console gamers for the most part, and the more I can join in on the fun, the better.
Yeah, you've missed out on a lot of the PS4 exclusives. You kind of you just skipped that generation. So
and the equivalent of whatever Microsoft released, whatever name they chose that time. I missed out on both, and Nintendo, all the consoles. I just have PC, man. That's it.
Yeah. So would you hop into the first party exclusive if we got Spider-Man, if we got The Last of Us, if we got Uncharted? Would you play them on PC? Would you be there?
Of course, I've wanted to try these games. I was even considering next gen to grab one of them and go with it, but time to game is tight, It's
yeah.
I play one at a time. That's all I can do right now.
Darren, to ask you one last question, because there was a bit more that happened with these stories. One of the Sony Twitter accounts, one of the international ones, when they tweeted out talking about welcoming Housemarque to the family, they actually tweeted Blue Point Studios logo instead of Housemarque. And this looked like a very professionally designed thing, exactly the same way that the Housemarque is. So I want to ask you, Darren, quickly, before we move on to our last story. Do you think that was a slip-up? Was that an accident, revealing a piece of news too early? Or do you think somebody messed up and that's not happening, Sony has not bought Blue Point, and it's just, it was an honest mistake? Or do you think that was a leak?
Man, I think it does take effort to Photoshop in a picture, a Photoshop in a logo into a picture. That's not something that you could just instantly do. Maybe it is. I'll say I wouldn't be surprised if they bought Blue Point. Sony's been working with Blue Point for a long time, and it sounds like a studio that they would want to have. So I'm going to lean towards it's a slip up rather than a mistake.
So you think that this kind of announcement could be imminent? It could be coming soon.
I think it could. I really think it could.
I hope you're right. I think I'm super, super curious to find out what Blue Point's doing next, whether it's Metal Gear Solid or whatever else the rumors are. I'm curious to see, but I'm guessing we'll find out soon. Just a quick one, PlayStation Plus games for July 2021 announced, coming from Adam Bankrust. We are getting, on PS5, A Plague Tale Innocence. PS4 is getting Call of Duty Black Ops 4 and WWE 2K Battlegrounds. Be aware that Call of Duty Black Ops 4 is the one that is only multiplayer. There was a lot of confusion online, a lot of people being, I'm excited to jump into a new COD single player. Nope, Chuck Testa, that is only multiplayer. And again, Plague Tale, a lot of good reviews. People seem to really like that game. It's only PS5, but fuck that game. There's so many rats. On to our very last news story, one that Darren brought to the table this week. I'm going to be pulling from Kotaku, written by John Walker. PlayStation is hard to work with, devs say. After yesterday's industry-wide discussion of the cost of being visible on Sony's PlayStation Store, and to give a bit of context, devs have to pay anywhere from like $25,000 to as much as $200,000 to get featured on the PlayStation Store, and this is also common across other platforms as well. But PlayStation is the one that we're talking about today. There were two main reasons for our article yesterday, highlighting one of the independent developers' frustrations with working with Sony to sell games on the PlayStation Store. The first was a confusing number of people convinced that this was somehow a part of an underground conspiracy to destroy Sony. The second was many indie games developers and publishers getting in touch to say that, yes, wow, Sony are far harder to work with and sell games through than anywhere else. So basically what the devs were talking about was that apparently Sony's backend is a mess. Getting games onto their platform properly is a maze of confusing development choices and just generations old technology. They have certain managers that they put in certain spots that are apparently very hard to hear from and actually hard to get in touch with. Getting your game on sale is apparently incredibly difficult, and it's basically on a quote-unquote invite-only scenario where your game has to be invited into being able to have a sale, not one that you can just kind of request. So it seems like I'm going to put this article in the links below as well, because it's a very long, complicated one. But basically, it seems to be a very, very difficult for an indie developer to get their game on PlayStation. Darren, tell me why this sucks.
Yeah, sorry, I was trying hard not to laugh listening to you read that article. Because Kotaku, and I'm sorry, I did bring this to your attention. It is my fault that we're pulling from Kotaku. Kotaku as a website I don't like the way they write. It's very clickbaity. And as you noticed, as you're trying to read through it to get to the content. But what they're saying is still sounds like there's some truth to it. And so I brought this up because we care a lot about indie games on this show. And we care a lot about indie games getting known and getting coverage. And it's really disheartening to hear that Sony doesn't seem to care. And I know they have a indie, marketing studio, but it sounds like, and like you said, it's not perfect on any platform, but there are many ways to get known and noticed as an indie game on Switch, on the Switch shop and the Xbox shop for free, where the indie devs don't have to put any money forward. And it doesn't seem like that isn't possible at all with Sony. You have to put money to be seen. And even when you put money to be seen, your sales are lower on PlayStation than on any other console or any other platform. One dev specifically said that, like, while a game sold 20,000 units on Xbox, sold 7,000 on PS4, DLC sold about 2,000 units on Xbox and sold 7 units on PS4. 7 units of DLC sales. And I think a big issue is Sony's store is garbage. It is trash. They need to fix that store. I complain about Nintendo's store because you look at it and it's like a bunch of garbage asset flip games mixed in with new releases. But at least that's a fair playing field for indies to be discovered. Their game's on sale, then it goes to the deals section, so they can push themselves to the top of the list. And all of the functions to make your game go on sale are in the hands of the publisher and the developer. They can choose whenever they want to go on sale. Sony, they need to ask permission, and there's no good way to get to the top of the list. Even new releases on Sony's store, if you go to sort by new, they show you a bunch of games that aren't even out yet. It's insane. Sorry, that was my rant.
No, that's okay, Darren. I think you're right. I think especially with how much, we talk about indies, it's really, it sucks. PlayStation is my favorite platform, and it sucks to hear that indie developers struggle so much to get their games noticed. And I mean, being able to even do that if you don't have the, the money up front to be able to pay for your way in, it sucks. And I hope that, PlayStation starts to rectify this a little bit and make it easier for developers to access, especially because, I mean, indies helped make the PS4 what it was, especially in the first while of its lifespan. They went hard in that messaging in the PS4 era. We care about indies. We love indies. Indies. And to be fair, they still do that to some extent on the PS5, much less, but it sucks to hear that they're not making things easier for them.
Yeah, Matt, why do you think this is a problem?
I think their infrastructure sucks. I mean, it's why you didn't have PlayStation name changes available to yourself until like the end of the PS4 generation, and even still, it was asterisk the fuck out because like your games might work, some might not. Your game doesn't actually like your name doesn't actually change. It's just the way that the users see it changes. Like their online infrastructure is so dated and so broken that I feel like instead of actually trying and granted, it would be a significant amount of work to overhaul everything and to make it known. Like one of the devs that in the story was talking about how they're 3 generations old in terms of some of their tech. They need better online infrastructure and they need better online stores. They need a better online ecosystem. And I just don't know if they're willing to put the money in and the time and the development resources without breaking everything and, doing that. I think that's one of the
Matt,
biggest things.
I'm sorry, before we close up, I would like to ask you one last question because you are our resident PlayStation boy.
Yeah.
Do you think the reason it's like this has something to do with Sony's focus on AAA first-party games that they make over everybody else?
I don't think so, and I don't think that's entirely fair. I think Nintendo does the same thing. I think Nintendo is pretty much they push their first party stuff just as much as Sony does. I think it's honestly the biggest thing. I think their online ecosystem sucks, and like we have like so much showing that it does. I just don't think they're willing to fix it, and I think they're going to end up jeopardizing some of the relationships with indie developers because of it. I think that like if they were able to implement it easily, I think it would have been done. I don't think they can, and I think that's why you're seeing this happen.
Well, then how come it's like that on other platforms?
Because their online infrastructure is obviously, and I can't believe I'm going to say this about Nintendo, better figured out than how Sony's is currently put together. So I think that's the biggest thing. I honestly think their ecosystem is so broken, and they're just not willing to fix it.
Okay.
So they focus on their first party stuff. But that, my friends, brings us to the end of the show. Alistair, thank you so much for joining us. It was an absolute pleasure. Destiny misses you very, very much, so we're going to have to get you back on in the future when she's on, because she's asked about you. I can't even tell you how many times. Thank you for joining us again.
Definitely. Great thank you to be back on. I'm always happy to come back. Destiny, I will see you again soon. Sorry to dodge you today. But yeah, thank you.
Wes, it was an absolute blast. Your expertise and your knowledge, especially like the way that you build worlds and stuff, is so cool to listen to. So thank you for joining us, and I hope you'll come back and talk to us again in the future.
Oh, the second you invite me, I'll be here. Just let me know, man.
I also think, and I'm going to kind of slide this out, and maybe in the future we can do a podcast recording of a D&D session. I'm just going to throw that out there. But anyways, moving on.
I'd be down.
Darren, as always, it's been a pleasure. Guys, we will be back next week. Darren, very quickly, because I forget to do this too much, where can people find you if they want to hear more from you, Darren, specifically you, Darren? You.
You can find me on Twitter at burnout_Darren, and that's it.
Yeah, you can also find us at youtube.com/burnoutbrighter. We're going to have a review going live later this week, and we have much more cool stuff coming. We are getting ready for episode 100 in about a month, and we have some really, really cool stuff that we'll be announcing very, very soon. So keep your eyes locked. Make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe, hit that bell to be notified when our stuff goes live. We appreciate the support. And also, I forgot to announce this as well. The other podcast that I'm on, the PlayStation Drive, PlayStation only podcast, is now on free feeds. Just search up the PlayStation Drive. You can hear me and my good friend Ryan Turford talk all about PlayStation, so find us there as well.
That's
Keep
awesome.
it locked. We have so much coming. Come support the NMO, the Mats, on Saturday at Mario Golf. We'll see you guys next week. Peace out.
Peace.
Later.
Bye.
Video games let you do stuff you can't do in real life. D&D and tabletop role-playing games let you do stuff